Forget the glittering camera flashes, the shimmering gowns, and the platinum perfection that Hollywood sold to the world for decades. Beneath the radiant smiles and silver screen allure lay a woman who was far more fragile than the public ever realized. Marilyn Monroe, the most desired woman on earth, often fell asleep in tears, shivering beside men who treated her not as a person, but as a possession, an accessory to their own egos. In the quiet, agonizing solitude of her final days, Marilyn did more than leave behind unanswered questions about her life and love. She left a diary, a record of her most intimate revelations. It was not a confession about presidents or mobsters, nor a catalog of glamorous scandals. It was a damning indictment of 5 Golden Age icons, the gods of Hollywood, whose public personas masked a far uglier reality. She wrote of their selfishness, their cruelty, and their devastating inability to love. These men were not simply imperfect lovers. They drained her spirit and returned only emptiness. Tonight, we open that diary to reveal the truth beneath the Hollywood veneer, to understand the suffering behind the frame. Number 1. Tony Curtis. To fully comprehend the pain his name evokes, we must travel back to 1958, to the sun-drenched sands of the Hotel del Coronado, where Some Like It Hot was being filmed. On screen, the film is a Technicolor triumph, a perfect comedy, remembered for its laughter and charm. Off-screen, however, the air was thick with tension. Marilyn, struggling with her own inner battles and insecurities, sought comfort in the arms of her co-star, the devastatingly handsome Tony Curtis. To the world, they were a flawless pair. Behind closed doors, however, the reality was far darker. When the cameras stopped rolling, Curtis committed one of the most infamous insults in Hollywood history. He told reporters that kissing Marilyn Monroe was like kissing Hitler. That comment shaped public perception for decades. Audiences were led to believe Marilyn was difficult, unprofessional, and impossible to love. Yet her private diary tells a very different story. Curtis's cruelty did not stem from her performance or temperament. It arose from his own suffocating vanity and obsession with self-image. The woman who was perceived as temperamental was, in fact, a victim of a man unable to see anyone beyond himself. Marilyn painted a chilling portrait of Curtis in her diary. He did not make love. He performed a ritual of self-worship. In private, the passionate actor vanished, replaced by a man obsessed with surfaces, treating intimacy as a clinical procedure. Marilyn described a coldness so profound it froze the blood. Curtis was a germaphobe consumed with cleanliness, a man for whom physical connection was terrifying. There was no messy passion, no raw desire, only a sterile, rehearsed act. Her body was not cherished, but treated like a surface to touch with invisible gloves. Every encounter was precise, fastidious, and utterly devoid of warmth, leaving her profoundly alone. The most devastating detail of all was his gaze. During their moments of supposed intimacy, Curtis never looked at her. His eyes were fixed on the mirror across the room, admiring himself, while Marilyn existed merely as a prop in his one-man show. Tony Curtis's tragedy was one of jealousy and fragile ego. He could not tolerate Marilyn outshining him in any room. In the bedroom, he punished her with cold indifference, projecting his insecurities until she felt small, dirty, and unworthy. His infamous Hitler comment was not humor. It was a lash from a man whose ego had been bruised by her brilliance. Anyone who has loved someone obsessed with their own reflection can understand the hollow pain Marilyn endured at the Hotel del Coronado. Curtis shone on the surface, polished and dazzling, but inside, he was empty. He embodied the artificial perfection of Hollywood, the glossy veneer Marilyn came to despise. Number 2. Marlon Brando, the monster of filth. Where Curtis represented sterile polish, Brando embodied the raw, untamed underbelly of Hollywood. By the mid-1950s, Brando was the god of method acting, brooding, intense, and wild, a dark prince promising emotional depth. Marilyn, ever in search of authenticity and artistic credibility, was drawn to him like a moth to flame. She hoped to find a man whose soul mirrored her own fragile intensity. Instead, in the shadows of Brando's New York apartment, she discovered a nightmare. Brando's lack of hygiene was a badge of honor, equating filth with masculinity. The air reeked of stale food, tobacco, and the sour tang of a body that had not known soap in days. For Marilyn, intimacy with Brando was an assault rather than a romance. He approached sex with clumsy selfishness, treating her body as a stress ball to release his own frustrations. She felt like an instrument, an object beneath hands that neither cared for her pleasure nor her dignity. Beyond the physical, there was intellectual betrayal. She had come expecting a kindred artistic spirit. She found a man whose method was an excuse for laziness. His animalistic persona was no act. It was a refusal to take responsibility, leaving Marilyn dirty, diminished, and emotionally bruised. This heartbreak differs sharply from Curtis's. With Brando, it was not sterile detachment, but engulfing chaos. The realization that the bad boy she had admired was dragging her down into filth, into suffering she had never anticipated. Number 3. Frank Sinatra, the godfather of indifference. Leaving Brando's chaotic world behind, Marilyn found herself in 1961 at the Cal Neva Lodge on the California-Nevada border. Sinatra, the chairman of the board, ruled the space like a puppeteer, every movement calculated. Publicly, he was a gentleman, singing love in velvety tones, exuding charm and charisma. Privately, however, he understood neither love nor empathy, only control and ownership. Intimacy with him was a cold transaction. Whereas Brando's chaos was physical, Sinatra's cruelty was strategic, chilling, and precise. Obsessed with cleanliness, reportedly showering up to 12 times a day, he projected a sterility that left no room for warmth or spontaneity. In their private moments, he handled Marilyn like an employee under inspection, giving her no voice, no agency. When he finished, he would turn to join friends at the card tables, leaving her alone in the cold sheets. Sinatra embodied the intersection of fame, power, and misogyny, a place where a woman's value was measured only by her utility to a man of influence. Number 4, Sir Laurence Olivier, struck Marilyn with a different weapon: intellectual arrogance. Filming The Prince and the Showgirl in London in 1957, Marilyn arrived eager to learn from one of the greatest actors of the English-speaking world. Instead of mentorship, Olivier imposed judgment. He brought British conservatism into every intimate space, treating her vulnerability as a deficiency. Flawless in technique but devoid of human warmth, Olivier's touch was calculated and precise. Marilyn felt reduced, her mind disregarded, her emotions treated as trivial. The silent condescension of Olivier left her hollowed, convinced that her sensitivity was a weakness. She departed London with shame, not triumph, a story that resonates with anyone whose intellect has been weaponized against them by a partner whose arrogance overshadows empathy. The fifth and final name on Marilyn's list was Clark Gable, a heartbreak rooted not in cruelty, but in love and longing unmet. In 1960, on the Nevada set of The Misfits, she faced the man she had idolized since childhood, the king of Hollywood. She carried hope that in his arms she would find protection and security, the father figure she had longed for in every other man. But Gable was frail, 60 years old, ravaged by decades of smoking and drinking. Marilyn's diary speaks not of passion, but of the overwhelming scent of decay, bourbon, tobacco, and the sweet, unmistakable aroma of a body slowly shutting down. She became his caretaker, tending to trembling hands, soothing coughs, and labored breathing. The roles were reversed. The childlike hero she had imagined was gone, leaving her to prop up a man too weak to support her. The tragedy did not end on set. Days after filming concluded, Gable suffered a massive heart attack and died. Marilyn blamed herself, convinced that her presence, her needs, and the weight of the production had contributed to his death. He was not cruel, nor intentionally selfish. He was a human tragedy, and his passing taught her the most devastating lesson of all. Even heroes bleed, and placing your hope for salvation in another human being can lead only to heartbreak. Marilyn Monroe did not die simply because she was alone. She died having spent her life shivering in the arms of men who could offer no warmth. The Red Diary chronicles her experiences with Tony Curtis's vanity, Brando's filth, Sinatra's cruelty, Olivier's arrogance, and Gable's decay. These men were the architects of her despair, the embodiment of how fame and power cannot replace basic human kindness. On August 4, 1962, in Brentwood, Marilyn closed the cover of her red leather diary for the final time, purging the truth about the 5 men who defined her golden age. Her legacy is not that of a doll, a glamour icon, or a fantasy figure. It is that of a woman who endured the gods of Hollywood and lived to bear witness to their flaws. And yet, the diary was not fully complete. Beyond the actors, there exists another chapter inked with the name Kennedy, holding secrets darker than any Hollywood scandal. Those pages remain unread, awaiting exposure.